If you want to know the secrets of existence and the true meaning of life, I can't help you. But if you want some book recommendations, why not try reading the ones I wrote? If you're a fan of giant monster mayhem and anime weirdness, why not try Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1? If horror is more your style, you can't go wrong with The Occult Mafia. Those who enjoy their fantasy with a dark twist may be interested in Emerald of Maddox City. And if you're interested in shared universes, why not read all three? Hop on down to the description for links to all 3 books on Amazon. Enjoy whichever ones you read, and enjoy the video.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni viewer, and I was right yet again. For years now, I have been hearing people constantly saying that Godzilla vs. Kong was going to be the end of the MonsterVerse. The MonsterVerse was only going to last for those 4 movies: Godzilla 2014, Kong Skull Island, King of the Monsters, and Godzilla vs. Kong, and after that it would end. It would be over, it would be the end of a shared universe, the series would not continue. That is what people constantly insisted on. Now, for the first little bit, the only defense we had that the MonsterVerse would continue was that absence of evidence doesn't always mean evidence of absence. Just because there was no announcement of what would happen after Godzilla vs. Kong didn't mean there wasn't some kind of plan to continue. It just meant we didn't know. Maybe it meant that it wasn't going to continue, but maybe it didn't. Of course, I know that wasn't much of an argument, but really all any side could say at that point was that nobody really knew. Eventually, in 2019, people who actually were at Legendary, the actual people at the studio, announced that they did have plans to continue the MonsterVerse after Godzilla vs. Kong. The reason they hadn't made any announcements was because they just were taking it deliberately slow. They wanted to make sure each individual film was as good as it could be before they moved on to the next one. Not necessarily a bad idea if you ask me. And the naysayers responded to this evidence by completely ignoring it. They continued to insist that there would be no future for the MonsterVerse after Godzilla vs. Kong. And when Godzilla King of the Monsters didn't perform as well as expected, it was not a flop, but it certainly wasn't the success people were hoping for, they felt even more certain that Godzilla vs. Kong would be the end of it. And when the Godzilla vs. Kong trailer finally dropped, you saw more people saying, boy, this is going to be such a great finale to the MonsterVerse, because it's definitely going to end, guys. There's no more movies after this. The license reverts back to Toho for Godzilla. Then Kong, well, we don't know what's going to happen with him, but there's no reason to continue the MonsterVerse after Godzilla vs. Kong. No, sir. And yet, here we are today, and I stand before you to let you know, if you haven't already heard, that Legendary has officially announced the next part of the MonsterVerse. It's going to be an anime series. Yes, an anime series, featuring King Kong on Skull Island. We don't know much more beyond that. The initial announcement for this, if you will, implied that it was going to focus on a crew of people shipwrecked on Skull Island, surrounded by all these monsters, and of course Kong is there. But that's just about all we know. That and the fact that it is actually part of the MonsterVerse. Now, if I were an especially petty and immature person, I would take this opportunity to tell all of the people who were saying the MonsterVerse would end, screw you all, I was right. But I'm not a petty and immature person, so I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to invite all of us to just sit back and celebrate, really. Celebrate the fact that the MonsterVerse actually is going to continue. Now, I'm sure some of you might hear this announcement and think, wait a minute, doesn't this spoil the outcome of Godzilla vs. Kong? If the next step in the MonsterVerse is going to be Kong-centric, doesn't that mean Kong wins, Godzilla loses, and maybe even dies, and that's the end of that part of the MonsterVerse at least? Well, the possibility exists that it could. However, like I said, we only know the very, very basic premise of the series and the fact that it's in the MonsterVerse. that doesn't really tell us anything when you get right down to it. In fact, assuming that this announcement does spoil the ending of Godzilla vs. Kong requires jumping to the conclusion that it's going to take place after Godzilla vs. Kong. Which again, it could, but that doesn't necessarily mean it will. Like I said, the initial announcement said it's going to be about people shipwrecked on Skull Island. To me, that says pre-GVK. Because, well, we know based on the trailers of Godzilla vs. Kong that Monarch probably has a way to get back and forth from Skull Island now. Unlike they did back in 1973 when Kong Skull Island takes place, they now apparently have a way to safely navigate through that perpetual storm. I mean, they've got to get Kong onto that ship somehow, right? Plus, they have an outpost there, and they're probably the kind of organization that would make a point of steering ships and planes and whatnot away from that area in order to prevent shipwrecks. So, my first thought is that it probably takes place beforehand. Maybe at some point during that time between 1973 and 2021, because there's a lot of time between then. We could very well see it take place somewhere in that stretch of time. Or, here's my wild theory, it could take place before Kong Skull Island. My outlandish proposal, if you will, is that it might be about the crew of the Wanderer. You may recall in Kong Skull Island, we see the temple where we learn the history of Skull Island and Kong's species. That's built inside of this giant ship, the Wanderer. And Marlowe says that got wrecked there about 10 years before he showed up. He landed there in the mid-40s. 10 years before that would be the mid to early 30s, which is around the same time the original King Kong story is supposed to take place. And that was just meant to be a fun Easter egg for super nerds like me at the time. But that could also potentially be the jumping off point for this series. It could be about that crew, maybe similar to the one we see in the original film, but maybe something completely different, getting wrecked on Skull Island and encountering all of this stuff. It's possible. I don't necessarily think there's a reason to put that many chips on that square, but it could happen. Legendary, if you like that idea and you want to know more, I expect to be contacted and put on the payroll. But getting back to whether or not this announcement spoils the end of Godzilla vs. Kong, the announcement was not accompanied by another announcement saying that the Godzilla license had expired, or that there wouldn't be any more Godzilla movies. There's still a big blank spot there. We don't know. And even if we did know whether or not there'd be more Godzilla movies, even that wouldn't necessarily explain the outcome, because, well, it's still possible that either of them could technically lose the battle, but losing doesn't necessarily mean either one of them is gonna die. Let's not forget, there is still the possibility for a tag team by the end. So, we don't necessarily know whether the ending has been spoiled. So ultimately, we still don't know the outcome of Godzilla vs. Kong. Either one of these guys has the potential to win or lose, survive or die. All we know for certain is that there's going to be an animated series focused on Kong. It could take place after GVK, or it could take place before GVK. All we know is that it is a thing that is happening, and the MonsterVerse is going to continue. Maybe now I won't have to listen to people talking about how the MonsterVerse is doomed anymore. All of that being said, though, I am hesitant about getting too excited for this series because this announcement feels incredibly familiar. You may recall back in 2017, well actually maybe you don't recall because it's been so long with no updates on it that I wouldn't be surprised if you did forget. But back in 2017, after Kong Skull Island was released, a King Kong TV series set on Skull Island about people who are shipwrecked there was announced. And nothing ever came of that. I kind of suspect actually that this new announcement is that old idea being picked up and dusted off again. I mean, it's the exact same thing. It might just be coincidence, but I highly doubt it. Even so, that series was announced as in development, and it got nowhere. I hope that doesn't happen here, but then again, this isn't the first time Legendary would have made such an announcement and not made any progress on it. People occasionally ask me if I've heard about the Pacific Rim series that's in the works. And yes, I did hear that announcement. Way back in 2013 when Guillermo del Toro made it. That's how long that project has been in the works. And where are we with that exactly? I think there's a title. There might have been a trailer. I don't know, but it took a very long time. So, yeah, that took a while, and I don't even really know if that's still even being fast-tracked. All I can say is, I hope that the Kong series does get prioritized. I mean, admittedly, King Kong is a slightly easier thing to sell than Pacific Rim because King Kong is an American icon for starters, a cinematic icon recognized all over the world, definitely has a better reputation than Pacific Rim does after Uprising happened. But even so, just the fact that it was announced doesn't mean anything on its own. What really matters is progress being made, and let us hope that 1, progress is made, and 2, it's progress we can get behind. Well, anyway, that's the really big announcement for the week. The MonsterVerse is not ending. It is continuing. It's going to be focused on King Kong. We don't necessarily know if that means Kong wins or Godzilla wins in the upcoming movie. We don't know if that means the Godzilla license is going to expire or if Toho is not going to license more monsters to Legendary after this. All we know is that a Kong series set on Skull Island is happening, and it's set in the MonsterVerse, which is not going to end. And that's the news. Well, I've ridden this wave for about as long as I can. Now I need to get on to some of my bigger projects. In the meantime, feel free to leave your thoughts on this development in the comments section below. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off.
If you enjoyed what you just saw, hop on down to the description for links to Patreon, DeviantArt, and all of our social media, as well as links for Operation Red Dragon, The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, The Occult Mafia, and Emerald of Maddox City, 3 original novels I think you'll really enjoy. Thank you all, and we appreciate your support.